Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Tag Collab. My name is Terry Arvisu Gonzalez, and this is a space where identity, leadership, and unapologetic truth telling kind of collide. Here, we take the raw experiences of being Latina, bicultural, and ambitious, and we hold them up to a light. We name the invisible scripts, the cultural whispers, and the unspoken rules, and then we decide which ones to keep and which ones to break and which ones to rewrite. So today I am talking about my last article and podcast, which is called the el what will they say, or el que dirán, which is often the silent saboteur of so many Latina women. And what do I mean by that? It can start early. We show up with confidence only to feel like we're a little too much. We win, then we wonder if somehow it made somebody else uncomfortable. That quiet voice asking, what will they say? Or el que dirán, is more than self doubt. It's a deeply embedded script, a survival mechanism dressed up as humility, and for many Latinas and women of color more broadly, it becomes a haunting echo that shapes how boldly we dream, how freely we speak, and how fully we allow ourselves to grow. At least some of us, because we're not all alike. The weight of social surveillance. In Latino households, especially, we hear it all the time. Respeta la autoridad, be respectful, no te creas mucho, don't think too highly of yourself, or este que se cree, no? You hear them talk about other people sometimes too. And that becomes, materializes in us sort of the way you're supposed to act, right? In society. Family comes first, primero la familia, and above all, you kind of avoid being in boca. You don't want to be in boca de nadie. You don't want to be talked about by other people, to give other people something to talk about. And we avoid it like the plague. Even sometimes, and ironically, not just the bad stuff, the good stuff too. It makes being in the spotlight sometimes, for some of us, highly uncomfortable. Now, these are beautiful values that we have as Hispanics, and I stand by firmly by them. I refuse to change that about myself. Respect, humility, family. But sometimes, and this is what we do in this space on this tag collab and my writing, there is enough safety to lay it all out on the table and figure out whether it's working for us or whether it's working against us, because some parts of it may and some parts of it may not. And in doing so, we are not putting our families upbringing of us under, it's not under indictment, as I tell my mom. On the contrary, I can in the same voice say what an amazing job she did as a parent, and at the same time there's a few things that maybe I interpreted them wrong, or maybe they need to be re-examined by a 47-year-old as opposed to a 7-year-old who heard some of these cultural scripts, and what it was appropriate behavior and what it was to survive, right? um, Sometimes those scripts, they silence us right at the moment when our voice is needed the most. And so unapologetically and courageously, I it is a topic that I like to talk about for that reason, because I don't think I'm alone. Growth mindset versus mindset. Here's where psychology can sometimes come in. Carol Dweck's research on mindset shows that a fixed mindset makes us believe our abilities are static, that if we fail, it means we're not good enough. A growth mindset, on the other hand, sees failure as information, data, it's a stepping stone. But el que dirán often pushes us into that fixed mindset. We don't want to be wrong in public. We don't want to give people the satisfaction of saying, I knew she couldn't do it. I'll be honest, there are times I've stayed quiet in meetings even when I had the answer because I didn't want to risk looking foolish. Times I held back on pitching bold ideas, thinking, what if I'm wrong? Is this going to expose me as a fraud, right? Oftentimes you hear in the space of, I want to say, female empowerment, although you know that I don't stand just for female empowerment. I believe in empowerment for all. Um, We're afraid to be exposed as a fraud. We're afraid to, it's that imposter syndrome that I think plagues not just women, but sometimes minorities as well. And that's the irony. Playing it safe to avoid mistakes often leads to the costliest mistake of all, which is not stepping fully into our power. So, what is the cost of playing small? As a newsroom leader, there were moments when I second guessed my instincts many times. I think maybe I should wait, maybe I should soften this idea, maybe it's too much, or I went oftentimes, which I don't completely disagree with, but I went and socialized it first amongst people who um, I trusted and could help me think it through. I still think that's a good rule of thumb for two reasons. Number one, what are my blind spots that I might improve? And number two, if I sold other people that were going to be in the room on it first, it changed the way that I would pitch. And that's a secret that I think often doesn't get exposed enough in corporate America is I, like, the A student that I was, spent a lot more time sometimes working on the pitch deck and how I was going to present, as opposed to socializing it in advance. Um, Not just for the reason that I said about exposing my own blind spots, but because if I could gain traction outside the origin, where I was going to pitch it officially, and those people were in the room, it totally changed the dynamic. And I think it's something that I learned a little bit later in age. So socializing is great for your blind spots, but it's also great for being strategic and walking into a room and already having some really key allies sitting in that room. So, I realized that the feeling of being an imposter wasn't proof that I didn't belong. It was proof that I was stretching beyond my comfort zone. It is the way that we should see this. And that stretch is actually where growth and leadership lives, right? Breaking the cycle. So, how do we break it? The first is, and it's why this space on the Tag Collab and my writings exists, is so that we name the script. I love to say, name it to tame it. The moment this has a name, that feeling inside of anxiety of, oh, do I speak up or not, or whatever, the moment you put words around it, it becomes conquerable. Say it out loud to yourself. This is el que dirán. This is the fear. This is not fact. This is my fixed mindset taking over. Building psychological safety in your home, in your team, in your community. It is so important, like I said, to create spaces where mistakes and risks and differences are welcome. Safety breeds courage. I have been enormously, enormously blessed to have what I call my board of directors. That's my personal board of directors, or as I would say, as the president of my own little nation, my cabinet, people who I could safely go to when I had an idea fragment, and I'll write about idea fragments at another time, where we could safely examine this and get a great, feedback, in order to to diminish perhaps the risk, right? But you as a leader need to know that it is so important to create these spaces on your teams and in your family where mistakes can be made, the experimentation is encouraged, and that it can and that is part of a process, not the end result. um, we know psychologically that if people feel safe, they will experiment and innovate more. And so it is incumbent upon you as the leader to create that space, or even as a parent, right? To create that space and to rewire maybe some folks who were brought up to think that mistakes were a finite point, and and that life was a sum game. And I want to point out that some of this is important to know, that this train of thought that I'm talking about here, or that this school, sort of educate, what's the word? School of thought. about growth mindset and about not, about mistakes being data and being part of a process is a relatively newer school of thought. It was the psychologist who introduced growth mindset and versus fixed mindset really did her work in the year 2000. So it's way beyond the fact of me at 47, maybe generations before me that didn't go to school at that time. The way we taught and what we learned was very, very different than what we're seeing today. So, anyhow, the third bit of advice after naming the script and building psychological safety is to rewire through action. The brain learns by doing. Every time you raise your hand, post the idea, correct the assumption, you're not just speaking up, you're rewiring the way that your brain works. Science calls it neuroplasticity. I call it healing. Use resistance as a signal. If the thought of what will they say shows up, it might mean you're doing something bold, something necessary. That's not a red flag, that's your growth edge. So, in closing, the next time El Que Dirán sneaks in, the next time you feel the pressure to disappear just to avoid being en la boca de nadie or la boca de todos, remember growth doesn't happen in silence. It doesn't happen in comfort and it doesn't happen in the fear of being found out. They may say, you've changed, and that's okay. And I hope you smile and say thank you because change is not betrayal, it's evidence of growth. This is the work of leadership, this is the work of healing, and this is the work of becoming. So, thank you for spending time with me. If this message resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their power. And as always, stay bold, stay rooted, and stay connected to us in the Cat Tag Collab. I'm Terry. Until next time, take care.